Hey guys, my name is Franklin Easton. I own Ironstone Performance here in Seattle, Washington. I'm a strongman competitor, a strength coach, and today I wanted to talk about the first part of what I intend to be a two-part series about training motivation, and not really motivation in the way that is classically talked about in the fitness industry, not like amped up rah-rah motivation, but how do we keep engaged and consistent with training? And this one's going to be more about medium to long term. The other one that I intend on making next is going to be about more short term. But how do we keep engaged and consistent with training through the medium and long term? How do we keep going at it for a long enough period that the really meaningful results in the gym aren't from a 12-week challenge? They're from a very prolonged period of time in the gym, training consistently with effort. That is how anybody gets anywhere really meaningful or significant. And finding ways to keep yourself doing that for a long period of time is really, I think, the key to long-term success and really achieving substantial results in the gym. The thing I think is sort of the first step to this is uh, finding what your overarching goal is. And when I say overarching goal, I'm not talking about what your goal is for you want to get a beach bod for the summer, or you want to deadlift 5 plates by the end of the year, or whatever. It's not that kind of a goal. It's more of a, why are we doing any of this? Why are we in the gym? Why are we lifting weights? Why are we doing any of these things? And um, these kinds of things typically aren't as short as, uh, well, I'm in the gym because I want to get that summer bod. I want to hit that deadlift PR. It's, but why does that matter? And kind of usually there's a couple steps back. It can be, often you'll see ones for longevity, being pain free, being able to compete at a high level, winning world championships, or competing at whatever level that person is at, supporting alternative goals, so being better in a physical job or a sport, um, being more aesthetic. Those are typically the ones that you'll hear. Kind of health broadly, which will kind of separate slightly from the longevity one, but um, yeah, those are usually your most common ones that at least I will run across for why somebody is wanting to do these things. And usually there's more than one. Usually people want to get strong, but they also want to look good. They want to have longevity. Like they usually want more than one thing. And for most people, especially when they're starting out, they very much can have kind of all of them. You really don't have to choose that much when you're starting out. But as someone gets further along, as someone becomes more advanced, they have to start making more choices. There's more trade offs involved with what direction you go, what you prioritize, and what you don't. So, to use a quick example, there somebody's a complete beginner and they want to look better, they want to be less in pain, and they want to improve longevity. They are going to be able to get all of those really solidly by just getting stronger, building muscle. It that will building muscle tends to be very aesthetic. It also tends to help people lean out quite a bit, and the habits that are involved with getting strong and building muscle also help quite a bit with leaning out, which are typically very aesthetic. The getting stronger, doing so with a good technique and a well structured program tends to make people feel a lot better. Their joints feel better. Everything just moves and feels better. They're less in pain. And having more muscle mass, having more strength is great for longevity. It decreases blood glucose levels. It decreases risk of osteoporosis. Like your risk of diabetes, risk of low bone density is much lower. Another number of other distinct health benefits, the mental health benefits of it. There's a lot of things that are substantial improvements in quality of life from weight training, alongside the pain and the longevity components to it. Um, so you can kind of get all of those worlds all at the same time. Now, as someone becomes more advanced, there starts to be more trade-offs between goals. If someone's going from they've never lifted weights to a 225 deadlift, those are, I think, pretty much no downside. You're getting just better and better. If they're going from a, let's say, 700 to 800 pound deadlift, there starts to be more downsides. There, you might have to make trade-offs where you have to get to a body weight that is not a healthy place to be. There might be conversations around PEDs that are not healthy things to do. There might be conversations about cutting out parts of your life that are otherwise healthy or otherwise enjoyable. If you outdoor hobbies, other physical activities that you just don't have the space in your training to do, that you're doing so much training you can't handle going hiking and going skiing and doing as much social activity. And depending on what the purpose that training is filling for you, that may or may not be worth it. Sort of where the what the most important of those overarching goals are, and what the highest priority of when you go to those trade-offs. It's not just you pick one route or you pick the other. It is on a sliding scale. It's a continuum. And you can be, if you let's take the, as you get to more extreme, you get that fork in the road between health and performance, or strength, let's say. It's not like you pick one path or the other. It's somewhere in that field. You can go way more in the health direction. You can go a little more in the performance direction, or a little bit more, or a little bit more, or a little bit more. Anywhere in this is an option, but there is a trade-off where you are, if you're maximizing performance, you're going to lose some on health. If you're maximizing for health, you're going to lose some on performance. And that's just a trade-off. At some point, as you get advanced enough, it's going to have to be made. And there's a multitude of those. Same thing with strength and aesthetics. As people get more muscular and put on strength initially, they're going to be pretty much the same path. And then as they get further along, they might have to put on more body fat to continue to put strength on, assuming that that's not, aesthetics is a bit more subjective, so it's a bit of a trickier one to say, but assuming that the putting on more body fat is not a part of their aesthetic goals, then they're probably going to lose out on some aesthetics by maximizing strength. If they're maximizing for aesthetics, they're probably going to lose out on strength because they're not building as much muscle as they possibly could, because they are staying a bit leaner. They are not allowing their body to put on as much tissue as it possibly can. So there do start to be these sort of trade-offs, and what at the margins is the most valuable. What is the what is the ratio you're willing to strike? It doesn't have to be the same thing forever. It doesn't have to be the same priority for you forever, but the knowing where you sit on that, at least right now, can help make better training decisions in a moment. I'll kind of get into that section next, but knowing why you're doing these things. With these overarching goals, they really should be things that don't really need questioning, that you know are valuable to you. You don't really need to ask why or dig into the details. It just is intrinsically valuable to you, whether it's longevity, whether it's being a world champion, whether it's whatever it is valuable to you and doesn't really require much more defense to it. I think that's where the best overarching goals lie, are ones that you just know are valuable to you. And again, they might not be valuable to you forever. They might be where through phases in your life, those might change. But right now, you don't really have to put much thought into whether longevity matters, whether being a world champion matters, whether being not in pain matters. You just kind of know the answer, and that is a sufficiently organizing enough overarching goal to help you make decisions from there. Now, one of the tricky things is a lot of these overarching goals are so long term that they are hard to get tangible shorter term engagement with over the course of months. Being engaged with training, that gets a bit trickier if the goal is longevity and you're in your 20s. It's hard to really have that be tangible enough to really keep track of. Even if you slip up, it's very non-obvious to you that you have, because you're several decades away from anything actually happening. So putting as much effort into training and nutrition and those things as possible in your 20s, I think, considering longevity at that age is awesome. It's going to set you up in a much better position than if you didn't. But it's very hard to see any sort of direct input. You do efforts, nothing really changes. You don't do efforts, nothing really changes, because you're so far away from when longevity concerns really start to hit you. That's not really there's no feedback mechanism. So what I think is really important at this stage is to consider, what are the psychological tendencies of this person. So whether it's you or a client, kind of what are the things that keep them engaged medium term. I'll give an example of a lifter I had this exact conversation with earlier this week. So when he started with me, he's been with me for several years now. He started with me at a pretty gnarly low back injury from a work issue, and then a previous gym he was training at. We overhauled his technique, reworked his programming, built him back up, ended up being the strongest he's ever been with zero pain. From there, got a job as a firefighter, and then training for that, being competent enough at firefighting was the next big push. Now that he's established as a firefighter, he's not in pain anymore. There's sort of a, well, what do we do now? And the not being in pain was a big central part of his goals initially. That's largely been taken care of. There's some things you need to do on maintenance to make sure these things don't come back, but that's largely been resolved. The question of him being able to perform as a firefighter, he's able to do his job pretty damn well. He's one of the stronger firefighters. He's able to hold his own with some very experienced firefighters quite well. So while being in stronger and better shape is probably helpful, he's kind of largely checked that box. And that's not a sufficiently engaging enough medium term goal to keep consistency and to keep things focused for a prolonged period of time. So, when talking through what would be the best fit for him, he's got a athletic background, kind of competed his whole life. It seems that competitions really seem to focus and keep things consistent on a medium time scale much more effectively than just we're doing this for longevity, we're doing this for your ability to be a firefighter, we're doing this to keep you out of pain in the future, even though you're not right now. That doesn't seem quite as motivating as okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do this competition, and we're going to have that as be the medium term goal. But really, we're doing that because that keeps you more engaged with what your actual long term goals are. We're really doing it for those big goals, but those are not in a medium term quite as motivating as having this other medium term goal to focus on and focus training, focus consistency both in the gym stuff and out of the gym stuff. Now, when making those choices around competing, we also have to be careful to not, because it's very longevity, pain free, and firefighting focused, not make choices that are going to sacrifice one of those just to optimize for competition. That we're using competition as a way to keep psychology more engaged, but that's not the forefront. That's not the overarching goal. So it shouldn't come at the expense of the overarching goals. If it was that well, okay, to maximize your total to get the most out of your strength possible, we need to put on 100, 150 pounds. That might make him way stronger, but that's probably going to make him a worse firefighter. That's probably going to cut into longevity and health. That's probably going to be a net negative for his overarching goals, even if it would be a better option for his more short term, more medium term competition goals. So being very clear about which goals are we using as a tool to keep us engaged and focused in the medium term versus what are we using as the actual like North Star? What is the broad direction we're going? How am I going to make sure we continue to move forwards, but we don't want to make sure we're getting lost by focusing too much on competition, focusing too much on optimizing for the thing which we are just using to keep focused. We're not using this as the end goal, it is just a means to the end. Now, we take a different example, I'll actually use myself. Competing is my main focus. The reason why I'm doing the training and food and everything that I'm doing is to be the best competitor I possibly can. Now, I have a very unusual psychology. I think most people are closer to the firefighter I just described, where having something more medium term, having something more short term is helps keep things focused and engaged and consistent. I have an unusual psychology where I am more focused and consistent and a little bit more dialed in competition, but I can also go for long stretches of not competing and still be very consistent, still get all my training and all my food and get everything that I'm supposed to get in sort of whether or not it's leading into a competition. Um, and also my where I'm at in my competitive career, the biggest things I need right now are just long periods of developmental training. I just need to continue to get bigger and stronger, and that's when you just continue to work my way up over time. That just takes time, takes work, and a lot of food. So because of that, I actually end up competing not very often. It's been about 2 or so years since I competed. Now it'll probably be about 2.5 before my next competition between competitions. Um, and just long stretches of developmental training. Part of that was getting the gym set up and some other things that are going on in life. But um, I think as a overall strategy for where I'm placed in my strongman career, I think it was a relatively intelligent choice as well. It would be the best fit right now. So even though competition is the central overarching goal, I don't need ongoing competitions to keep myself engaged. And the most productive thing for me to get long-term progress is going to be just developmental training, just getting slowly stronger, putting on muscle, putting on size, putting on that strength that comes along with that. So you might look at the behavior of my firefighter client and myself and go, well, he's not competing very often. Presumably competing isn't that important to him. He's competing more often. Presumably competing is much more important to him. I'm going to guess that they're part of their overarching goals, part of the firefighters' overarching goals must be competition, and part of my overarching goals must not be. When in fact it's the exact opposite. It's the psychological tendencies are the ones that actually are going to make more substantial decisions for what the medium term strategies are and what's going to keep us at a medium term more engaged with training and more consistent. And then we're just having to make the actual directions that those psychological tendencies push us towards in line with what our long-term goals are, making sure we're not losing sight of that. But the on a day-to-day level, part of it's going to be the short-term stuff that I'll talk about in the next video, but part of it's going to be the part of what forms that day-to-day stuff is going to be the short-term stuff. Short-term stuff I talk about in the next video, but part of it's going to be that psychological tendency for those medium-term, what's going to be engaging for you, types of structures. And some people are more like myself that I understand it's very unusual that long stretches of training can be very focused and very consistent and doing all the in the and the out of the gym stuff that's supposed to happen. I think a lot of people need more of the ongoing, some sort of within the next 6 to 12 months, something that they're training for directly, something a little more tangible that's as long as it doesn't lose sight of what that overarching goal is going to help keep training a bit more focused and a bit more consistent there. So having a good grasp of what your overarching goals are, what are the reasons you're doing any of this, what are sort of the base unquestionable goals that are part of why you're lifting weights or exercising broadly, and what are you looking for out of that, having a good idea of what those things are, what is sort of the rank of importance, and what is the marginal value of those things, how much more important is one than the other, if there are trade-offs between the two, which direction are you going to sort of lean, where on that continuum are you going to fall between those two options or those multiple options. And then having an idea of your psychological tendencies, what keeps you engaged, what do you feel motivated and engaged with at a medium term basis that's going to allow you to train for months on end with focus and consistency and intent and keep you doing well towards your long-term goal, because you're going to get the most drive and you're going to get the most success in your long-term goal if on a more medium-term basis and short-term basis you're training hard consistently, doing the right things, eating well, sleeping well, doing those things properly. And I find people do the best when they are engaged with training in some capacity. And sometimes it's just having that routine, and that's just always what you do. If you need to have more competition and have some sort of event around it, it doesn't have to be an actual formal competition. It could be someone, we're going to do a mock meet in the gym, we're going to ramp up to a certain lift, whatever it might be. Finding ways to keep things engaging, keep things focused, so they are still driving you as not necessarily as hard as you possibly can, but with reasonable effort towards your long-term goal, rather than sort of floating along, which I find people who, if they tend to prefer having more of competition structure to things, but they aren't engaged in competition, I tend to find they are more of a floating along and they aren't really putting as much as they can into it. They have a lot more consistency effort both in the gym and out of the gym that they could be using that they're just not. And finding what is the psychological tendency that you have to get the most out of yourself. How do you really uh, kick yourself up to the highest notch? Know what can access that, and what are the directions and things you might use to help access that at least more often. Not necessarily all the time. You can't have yourself redlined all the time, year round, nonstop. That isn't really sustainable. But what's going to allow you to consistently give it the best you've got on a consistent basis. And then what are the things that would allow you to redline it? What are the things that would get you there? Is usually going to give you good insight onto how you might manipulate it one way or the other. But making sure when you make those choices, you're not losing sight of that longer term goal. You're not making decisions to optimize for that short term preference, that short term psychology, for the sacrifice of your broader, overarching, longer term goals that are really why you're doing this. And I'll leave it on this: that I've seen a number of people, lose their focus and their motivation in the gym because they've divorced their short-term psychological enjoyment from what their long-term strategy is. And people who they just started lifting weights because it's the only form of exercise that they actually enjoyed and would do consistently. They found that getting stronger was really fun. They found that powerlifting was really fun. And then they ended up making a number of very unhealthy choices and putting on a bunch of body weight, which does help you get stronger. It is much easier to put on muscle if you are much larger, but they put on an amount of body weight that was probably more than would be healthy for them. The main goal for them initially was to be more healthy, and then they lost some motivation, and they found kind of a lack of drive. And it seemed like a big part of that was they were putting too much that short term or the medium term psychological structure and priority towards that rather than and lost sight of their overarching long-term goal. So making sure that those two things are in adherence, they don't contradict each other. They don't have to be necessarily the same thing. It doesn't have to be obvious from the outside what your overarching long-term goal is based on your more medium-term behavior and that strategy. But they should not contradict. They should not be opposites or going in the wrong direction. So, let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer any of the comments down below. I'll get back to everything. Thank you for watching.